daily words of God.
Any who do not understand the purpose of God's work are those who stand against God. And even more so are those who are aware of the purpose of God's work, yet do not seek to satisfy God. Those who read the Bible in grand churches recite the Bible every day, yet not one understands the purpose of God's work. Not one is able to know God. Moreover, not one is in accord with the heart of God. They are all worthless, vile men, each standing on high to teach God. Though they brandish the name of God, they willfully oppose Him. Though they label themselves believers of God, they are ones who eat the flesh and drink the blood of man. All such men are devils who devour the soul of man, leading demons who purposefully disturb those who try to step onto the right path, and stumbling blocks that impede the path of those who seek God. Though they are of robust flesh, how are their followers to know that they are antichrists who lead man in opposition to God? How are they to know that they are living devils who specially seek souls to devour? Those who honor themselves before God are the most lowly of men, while those who humble themselves are the most honorable. And those who think themselves to know the work of God and proclaim the work of God to others with great fanfare while their eyes are upon Him, these are the most ignorant of men. Such men are those without the testimony of God, and those who are arrogant and conceited. Those who believe that they have too little knowledge of God, despite their actual experience and practical knowledge of God, are those most beloved by Him. It is men such as these who truly have testimony and are truly able to be perfected by God. Those who do not understand the will of God are opponents of God. Those who understand the will of God yet do not practice the truth are opponents of God. Those who eat and drink the words of God yet go against the substance of God's words are opponents of God. Those who have conceptions of the incarnate God and intentionally rebel are opponents of God. Those who judge God are opponents of God. And any who is unable to know God and bear witness to Him is an opponent of God. So hear my exhortation. If you truly have the faith to walk this path, then continue following it. If you are unable to refrain from opposition to God, then you best walk away before it is too late. Otherwise, it truly bodes ill rather than well, for your nature is much too corrupt. You do not have the slightest loyalty or obedience, or a heart that thirsts for righteousness and truth, and neither have you the slightest bit of love for God. It could be said that your condition before God is in utter shambles. You are not able to keep what you ought, or speak what you ought. You are unable to put into practice that which you ought, and you are unable to perform the function that you ought. You do not have the loyalty, conscience, obedience, or resolution that you ought. You have not endured the suffering that you ought to have, and you do not have the faith that you ought. You are completely devoid of any merit. Do you have the self-respect to go on living? I urge you that you are better off closing your eyes for eternal rest, thereby sparing God from concern for you and enduring suffering for your sake. You believe in God, yet do not know His will. You eat and drink the words of God, yet are unable to keep the demands of God. You believe in God, yet do not know Him, and live though you have no aim to strive for. You have no values and no purpose. You live as a man, yet do not have any conscience, integrity, or the slightest credibility. How can you be considered a man? You believe in God, yet deceive Him. Furthermore, you take the money of God and eat of His offerings, yet in the end show no consideration for God's feelings or conscience toward God. Not even the most trivial of God's demands can you meet. So how can you be considered a man? The food you eat and air you breathe come from God. You enjoy His grace, yet in the end you do not have the slightest knowledge of God. On the contrary, you have become good-for-nothings that oppose God. Are you not then a beast no better than a dog? Are there any among animals more malicious than you? Those pastors and elders who stand in the high pulpit teaching man are opponents of God and in alliance with Satan. Would not those of you who do not stand in the high pulpit teaching man be even greater opponents of God? Moreover, are you not then in collusion with Satan? Those who do not understand the purpose of God's work do not know how to be in accord with the heart of God. Certainly, it cannot be true for those who understand the purpose of His work. The work of God is never in error. Rather, it is the pursuit of man that is flawed. Are not those degenerates who willfully oppose God more sinister and malicious than those pastors and elders? Many are those who oppose God, and among those many men, there exist various kinds of opposition against God. As there are all manner of believers, so too are there all manner of those who oppose God, each unlike the other. Not one of those who do not clearly recognize the purpose of God's work can be saved. Regardless of how man may have opposed God in the past, when man comes to understand the purpose of God's work and dedicates his efforts to satisfying God, his former sins shall be wiped away clean by God. As long as man seeks the truth and practices the truth, God will not keep in mind what he has done. Rather, it is on the basis of man's practice of the truth that God justifies man. This is the righteousness of God. Before man has seen God or experienced His work, regardless of how man acts toward God, he does not keep it in mind. However, once man has seen God and experienced His work, all deeds and actions of man are written down in the annals by God. For man has seen God and lived within His work. When man has truly seen what God has and is, seen His supremacy, and truly come to know the work of God, and furthermore, when the former disposition of man is changed, then man will have completely cast away his rebellious disposition that opposes God. It can be said that every man has once opposed God, and every man has once rebelled against God. However, if you are purposeful in obeying the incarnate God, and thenceforth satisfy God's heart with your loyalty, practice the truth that you ought, perform your duty as you ought, and keep the regulations that you ought, then you are one who is willing to cast aside your rebelliousness to satisfy God, and one who can be perfected by God. Should you refuse to realize your errors and have no heart of repentance, should you persist in your rebellious ways and have not at all a heart to work with God and satisfy God, then such an obstinate fool as you will certainly be punished, and shall never be one to be perfected by God. If such, you are the enemy of God this day and tomorrow, and so too will you remain the enemy of God the day after. You will forever be an opponent of God and the enemy of God. How could God let you off? It is the nature of man to oppose God, but man cannot purposefully seek out the secrets of opposing God, because changing his nature is an insurmountable task. If such is the case, then you had better walk away before it is too late, lest your chastisement in the future become more severe, and lest your brutish nature emerge and become ungovernable until your fleshly body is terminated by God in the end. You believe in God to be blessed. If, in the end, only ills befall you, that would not be worthwhile. I exhort you to best construct another plan. Any other exercise would be better than your belief in God. Surely there is more than this one path. Would you not go on living all the same without seeking the truth? Why live at odds with God in this manner?